Sorry I'm late. Actually, no I'm not. I take that back. What do we got?
Homicide. It's a slaughter.
The victim?
GTX 1660 Ti. Gang affiliation, NVIDIA.
Any family?
Yes, sir. They're already here.
The suspect?
RX 5600 XT. New kid on the block repping for AMD. This was clearly a turf war. The 1660 Ti was the undisputed sub $300 GPU for almost a year. AMD finally decided to respond.
Cause of death?
Embarrassment. You can tell the GPU tried to run away, but clearly wasn't fast enough.
Any eyewitnesses?
There was a PC who saw everything,
Thank God.
but he has no memory.
Damn it! Tell me we have more evidence.
It's your lucky day, sir. We found a thumb drive with benchmarks that show the severity of the attack, but you might want to sit down when viewing them. They're graphic.
Tell the victim's family the city will pay for the funeral. I'll be back in 15.
Sir.
Alright, so as much as you guys probably love our new PC detective friend, I'm going to put his character on hold for a bit while we talk about actual benchmarks, just being a bit more serious here. But don't worry, he will be back towards the end of the video, so stick around for that. Really quick, I just wanted to go over the GPUs that we're using specifically. We've got the Power Color Red Dragon RX 5600 XT running stock. It does have a dual BIOS switch on it for silent and OC. I am using the OC mode, or the OC BIOS, for all of today's testing. The NVIDIA card is the EVGA XE Ultra GTX 1660 Ti, also running stock. This GPU only has one BIOS on it, so I use that one, of course. We've got a Ryzen 7 3700X running stock, Asus ROG Crosshair 8 Formula motherboard, 32 gigs of Trident Z DDR4 at 3600, and the CPU is being cooled by a 280mm Corsair H110i GT. And the first benchmark that I ran was Firestrike, and I was kind of blown away by these results. Right off the bat, you can see the 5600 XT is absolutely dominating in this test, both with the overall and the graphics score. If you look at TimeSpy, you can see that once again the 5600 XT has a pretty significant lead. Definitely showing its chops here when it comes to DirectX 12 performance. And bear in mind, since this is an AMD card, it should theoretically also be a good performer with Vulkan. You know, it identifies as API fluid, as we'll soon see. So for starters and ashes of the Singularity at 1080p, we see the 5600 XT pulling ahead by a good amount actually over the 1660 Ti, although with the 1% lows, the frame times are a bit tighter with the 1660 Ti. Over at 1440p, we see pretty much the same story here. Higher average frame rates with the 5600 XT and higher 1% lows with the 1660 Ti. Although here the 1660 Ti's frame times, low-end frame times, aren't pulling ahead quite as much as the 5600 XT's average frame rate is. So I think overall, this is still a victory for the 5600 XT. In Division 2, this is a very demanding game to run. You can see the 5600 XT did pretty well actually, 76 FPS on average with a 59% 1% low, whereas the GTX 1660 Ti unfortunately did not even top 60 FPS on average, which is usually kind of what you want to shoot for most gaming scenarios. At 1440p, you see both cards start to struggle. 5600 XT is still floating above 50 FPS on average, but you know, you're not getting that 60 FPS smoothness anymore. Whereas for the GTX 1660 Ti, this game is no longer playable at these settings and resolution, so you would definitely have to crank that down or just, you know, be okay with 1080p. Doom, we actually saw the 5600 XT hit that 200 FPS cap. There is a 200 FPS limit in the game, so it theoretically should have gotten more than this, but the game just cut it off there. Still very impressive performance. Oh, I should also mention that we're doing best versus best here in terms of APIs. So the GTX 1660 Ti was tested with DirectX 12, and the 5600 XT was tested with Vulkan. The 1660 Ti still getting very good performance, but comparatively speaking, just does not outpace the 5600 XT. At 1440p, we see pretty much the same story, with the 5600 XT doing better than the 1660 Ti by a significant margin. At 1440p, you can see just how much faster the 5600 XT is in this title now, because that 200 FPS cap is no longer being hit. In Far Cry 5 at 1080p, the 5600 XT is once again flexing on the GTX 1660 Ti with an average frame rate of 112 versus 95 on the 1660 Ti. 1% lows are also looking very strong for AMD here at 91 FPS versus 76 FPS on the 1660 Ti. At 1440p, we see pretty much a similar story with, frame rates going down a bit, but the 5600 XT still retaining its lead with still a very respectable 82 FPS, which is no easy feat to do in this particular game at 1440p. It is quite demanding. 1660 Ti is hanging on, still hovering over that 60 FPS mark, but maybe having a slightly more difficult time than its competitor here. In Metro Exodus at 1080p, we saw the 5600 XT getting 68 FPS on average with a 1% low of 31 FPS. This is the other title where the GTX 1660 Ti was unable to meet a 60 FPS average. At 1440p, the 5600 XT is no longer hitting 60 FPS, but it's still fairly playable. I would still suggest lowering the quality settings just to make it a bit smoother. The 1660 Ti, however, is starting to get into the no play territory. Red Dead Redemption 2 was the other title where we tested best-to-best APIs, so Vulkan with AMD and DirectX 12 with the 1660 Ti. I don't have to explain how buggy Red Dead Redemption 2 has been on PC, but my frame capture tool was not working properly with it, so I was unable to capture 1% lows. So instead we have minimum FPS, which is not a metric I typically like to use. Haven't used it for a very long time because it's more of an outlier. It's not super reliable, but this is what the in-game benchmark gives you. So here it is. 5600 XT did really well on Vulkan, 93 FPS on average, totally tanking the 1660 Ti with 74 FPS. Minimum FPS definitely seems to favor NVIDIA here, but again, it's not a metric that I often look at and is not super reliable, so I'm actually starting to wonder why I even included it on this slide in the first place. At 1440p, once again, the 5600 XT is able to stay with its head above 60 FPS, where the 1660 Ti does not, and once again, minimum frame rates should be more or less ignored or taken with a small grain of salt. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was the only title where we saw the 1660 Ti actually pull ahead by any amount over the 5600 XT, by a good stretch as well. 71 versus 77 FPS, 1% lows were looking favorable as well for the 1660 Ti. Bear in mind this is an NVIDIA optimized title, but we're certainly testing some AMD optimized titles in this suite of benchmarks as well. Bumping up to 1440p, things start to level out here as both GPUs see roughly a 60 FPS average. However, 1% lows are still looking better on the GTX 1660 Ti. So now we can take a comprehensive look at all of the rendered frames across all 7 game titles that we tested. And from the looks of it, the RX 5600 XT was able to deliver 14.4% higher average frame rates than the GTX 1660 Ti and 7.5% higher frame rates when it came to 1% lows. This is an awesome victory for AMD, considering that both these cards are roughly the same price. What's really interesting is that when we bump up to 1440p, that performance gap widens, which is usually the inverse of what happens. As games become more GPU bound, it's supposed to narrow, but here we see that we have a 23.6% lead in average frame rates over the 1660 Ti, and the 1% lows are also up by 13.7%. I mean, it's clear that looking at these graphs, despite these cards being in the same price tier, they're definitely in different performance tiers, and I'd even go so far as to say the RX 5600 XT has a fair shot of taking out, or at least keeping pace, with NVIDIA's RTX 2060. And NVIDIA, or at least some of their board partners, have already started to respond to the 5600 XT even before it launched. For example, at CES, EVGA announced and launched their RTX 2060 KO, which if you take a look at right here, there's 2 models of the KO. There's a standard one and an Ultra that is currently available for $300, actually not available because it's out of stock, and $320 for the Ultra model. When they initially launched the pre-orders, I believe this one was $279, so it was actually the same MSRP as the RX 5600 XT. So that was a direct response right there from EVGA, but that offer is long gone, and now it's back up to $300, which is still a couple bucks more than 5600 XT. This is not really a deal because you can still find RTX 2060s non-KO, just regular 2060s for this price. In fact, this is the lowest I've found RTX 2060s to be sold for on Amazon and Newegg. So Not to mention these KO models from EVGA kind of cut some corners when it comes to the manufacturing process in order to lower those manufacturing costs, which is why they're able to get away with selling it for a bit cheaper. But it's unclear if they perform just the same as a regular RTX 2060, and also the availability. Is this gonna be something that's just a sort of flash in the pan and, I mean, this one's already out of stock, is it gonna come back? And also, are other board partners gonna follow suit with EVGA and roll out their own variants of RTX 2060 KO cards that are gonna be cheaper and compete more closely with the RX 5600 XT? We just don't know. So for now, we're just gonna have to sit tight and wait to see how NVIDIA and their partners respond to this launch. As for now, I can say that the RX 5600 XT has left me impressed, and I would consider it a very solid buy, especially when pitted against the GTX 1660 Ti. Bear in mind, guys, remember this, that the two cards we tested today at the time of filming are the exact same price, $289, but this one outperforms it by 15% at 1080p. In fact, this is new information that our favorite PC detective has just been informed of. Let's see what he thinks.
Did you know the suspect and victim retail for the same price?
Yeah.
But this card's so much slower. Why should anyone care that it's dead?
I don't know. I was wondering why you were getting so hung up about it.
Cancel the funeral. I want this thing bagged and put in a dumpster fire.
Yes, sir. And what do I tell the family about their son?
Tell them to make another son that's better. And call the hunt off of the suspect. He's a winner. And I like winners.
Well, if there's nothing else, I think that's...
Case closed. Damn it, I'm good. Time to hit the bar and drink 20 shots of justice. Till next time, crime.